That was actually legitimately perfect timing.
Good evening. We went live the second you signed on somehow, just lined up. I'm talking to you, Stu. How are you, bud?
I'm doing well. I am figuring out my headphones right now.
So you would have been on earlier if you hadn't been spending so much time changing your display name to indicate Josh Sargent signed with Norwich till 2028.
I added that to our wind down. I don't know if you noticed. So
I noticed.
It's on the ledger.
And then we have to talk about it.
I mean, I am wearing a Sargent Norwich kit right now, so if my camera actually worked, you could see it, but the camera still does not work.
I was just considering buying a new camera because mine craps out like every 4th week. So I could maybe I will, and I'll send you mine, and maybe you'll have better luck.
It's not the camera. It's I have to update my firmware on my laptop, and I've tried a couple times. It's not going through, but it's an old laptop. You know how much? Yeah, it's not worth it. No one wants to see me anyways. So as long as you can see Matt,
that's so not true. That's so not true.
There you go. Well, let's go ahead and jump right in. It's about that time.
It's about that time, eh?
You guys good to go?
Righto.
Gotta collect myself. It's gonna be a little weird because it's a different format than usual. So,
well, at least we have an actual agenda this time. Remember the last time we didn't have a format around Leagues Cup, and I nearly gave myself a brain aneurysm with how sloppy and disjointed it all was, and then I had to cut it for KTRS, and I about lost my mind because it took hours to try and find a way to cut our random blabbering on.
You were way too nice about all of that.
That was I did it to myself.
You did a little bit
by saying, "Oh well, we don't have a game this week. We'll just wing it all, and I'll string it together." That was it. Never doing that again.
We'll try to make it more concise for tonight. So
I was very purposeful. I was thinking about using my recording from the press conference to play a couple quotes, but I don't know if that's going to sound well because it was very windy out of training today. That's why I put timestamps in for the quotes, because I was at certain moments and I was like, I could try this, but I think it would be more of a disaster.
You'd want to hardwire it. Are you able to hardwire it in, or were you?
I mean, I probably could if I had like 20 minutes to figure it out, but
if you ever want to send them to me, I can easily do that for you. So
mental note for next time.
Yeah. I'll just need time to cut it, which I might do that. Yeah, absolutely.
Because I was like, oh yeah, I could just do this, put my phone up by the speaker, but that would probably sound absolutely shitty.
It would be fine. I'm being too picky, to be honest with you.
The lowest quality possible.
I'm being me.
No, you're being honest.
All right, you guys good? Let's give this a shot.
Yeah, man.
Welcome, everyone, to Flyover Footy. We're broadcasting on the big 550 KTRS. It's a special one. We're broadcasting on a Friday night at 6 p.m. on the radio, and it feels special, everyone. We're happy to be here. I have my friends with me, thank goodness. Matt Baker's here. Stuart Hultgren is here, and we're here to have a good time talking about St. Louis City for you guys, and I hope you enjoy it. Matt, how's it going, man?
Whenever we get to talk about St. Louis City, it's a good time. It's a fun week. The weather's getting cooler. It truly feels like fall. And despite the fact that we haven't had a City game in 2 weeks at this point, things are good. But wow, am I itching to start watching some St. Louis City soccer again.
Yes, and it's going to be a bit of a weird show. I like the random shows, but we'll see how today goes. We got a lot of fun stuff to talk about. And this one's going to be a fun one for me. And Stuart, I don't know how you feel about the random shows. I don't know if you like structure or freeform jazz. I don't know what you're into, but how's it going, man?
I always love the chaos. No, I was at actually Brightgum Orchards over the weekend at a pumpkin patch and didn't run into the bakers. So I was shocked because that was a very baker activity. So But I'm loving the cool weather and the pumpkins, even when I don't see Matt and Michelle.
We must have been at dueling pumpkin patches then, because we were most definitely at.
Were you at these?
No, so there's a pumpkin patch at the corner of Barry and Lockwood over in Webster.
Yes, Sarah loves that one. Actually, we almost went there.
We go to the church that works that, and so
Okay.
we staff that actually. And I have seen numerous city attire and apparel walk through there. Every time I get the opportunity, I strike up city conversations, and people seem to be quite excited.
That is super cool. Well, I think in the future, this is like the first year we're kind of dealing with this. And hopefully in the future, we're going to start associating those feelings, the fall, the pumpkin spice, with St. Louis City playoffs runs. So let's get going into that. There was a presser today. It was a little bit laid back, just like this show is going to be. And Matt, you were there to get lots of really cool quotes from Carnell. It actually felt like there wasn't like a million things he had to touch on, and he kind of got to dig into stuff that he wanted to talk about. I don't know if that's how you felt, but some good stuff.
I did. It was the first time we were able to hear from Carnell since after the Vancouver game. So you have that break, you have a little bit of a letdown time. The players had about 4 or 5 days off, I believe. And so everybody was just kind of getting back into it this week. Tuesday was the first day the players were back at training. This was the first day media was allowed at training. And it was kind of, you could tell the intensity was building back up. And Carnell was very much, getting laser focused on what this weekend is going to bring as far as preparation for getting back into actual matches. And when he was asked certain questions, you could definitely tell that there was an excitement building towards this weekend and what the intra-squad scrimmage on Saturday will bring. And he said, as far as looking back on the first 33 games, looking back at Vancouver, anything like that, the quote was, the last thing we want to do is think the season's over. The minute you think about what has been and take your foot off the gas, we don't want to do that in our four walls here. We've got the gas pedal is full throttle. Internally with the staff, we've done some reflections. We're going to do it again after 34 games and after the playoffs. But here on the field and with the players, it's pedal to the metal. And I think that kind of really sets the tone for what we're about to see this weekend with City 2, and the Academy all kind of joining to bring the organization into what Carnell wants to prepare the team for going into Seattle. And I was excited to see health, honestly, because every single player that we expected to be out there on the field was out there. It was all of City, and it was one Academy player. And so everybody was healthy except for John Nelson, who was out rehabbing his hamstring. The update on Johnny Nelson is that he should be back training with the team in the next couple of days. But Carnell was very cagey on what that would mean for his future with the team on the roster or not, as far as the game day roster goes. And so it's good to see everybody with full health. You're talking Rasmus Alm was out there, and Carnell's quote on Rasmus was he's going to progress and he's going to do whatever he can until the season's over and he can have a prolonged rest period. Because if you know, Rasmus is dealing with the abdominal groin injury, and I don't know about you guys, but whenever I hear those things, I think, oh God, is he dealing with a hernia? And, that kind of thing is just, you need rest. You need just a prolonged period of rest, whatever it ends up being or is. And so that's what Rasmus is dealing with. I think any notion of him going the full 90 the rest of the season is probably over. So looking at him as a first half, a 60-minute, a second half sub, that kind of a thing for Rasmus Alm. Miguel Perez was back on the field. Lucas Bartlett was back on the field. Josh Yarrow was back on the field. It was good to see everybody out there competing against each other. And the one Academy player who was out there was Carson Locker, number 10 midfielder from the U17s. And Carnell's quote on Carson Locker is, "We've had Carson with us this week, training all week. Carson's gaining respect from some teammates here. Him and Edu Leuven seem to be hitting it off. So credit to Carson for showing up with no respect and earning it." And he was just out there, one of the guys. If it wasn't for the fact that he was noticeably smaller than a guy like Edu Leuven, but had the hair of Caden Glover to match, you wouldn't know that he was any different than any other player, aside from the fact that he stood out in those regards from who we're used to seeing out there. But it was a beautiful day. It was good to see everybody kind of on the field, and Carnell seemed very excited going into this weekend.
Love that. No respect and earning it. I want to back up just a little bit here because Stuart's with us, and I've been feeling this way, and I think there's no one better to talk about it than you, Stuart, because you haven't talked about kind of what happened in that last game, the rotated lineup, right? And, we hear Carnell talking about, the last thing we want to do in this season is to think that it's over, even for a second. It's been pedal to the metal, foot on the gas kind of thing he's saying. So it just feels like a transition where we kind of had an off game, and I think we all saw that coming a little bit, not necessarily the loss, but taking a break, getting a breather, and then now it's just like building up to the playoffs. I don't know how you feel about it, Stuart.
Well, really, the Minnesota game was the one I was concerned about with rotation, and if we actually rotated heavily for Seattle, but I can't see that happening. You know, you want the points record for what it's worth for, you know, posterity or whatever, but moreover, you want to go into the final game of the season and win on against Seattle. But I honestly didn't mind some rotation on the most recent match.
Yeah, I didn't either, and I wasn't necessarily trying to put that on you, but you know, it did kind of feel like a killer of momentum, but I don't know if it bothered me. I kind of been wanting to talk about this, guys, so I guess that's why I'm forcing it now. I don't know if you felt that way, Matt, or if I'm just the only one kind of feeling that way right now.
Maybe it was the way that it all shook out at the end with the 3-0 loss, but I just did not want to talk about Vancouver more than we had to, and I talked about it too much on our last podcast. I went deeper than I ever meant to, because in a way, I do feel like it was a throwaway game.
Yeah.
The Cardinal said after the game that they didn't stick to their principles at all, and it was he reiterated it today when there was a question at the presser about Vancouver, and despite the fact that it was a week ago, Cardinal still said the same thing he did after that game, that it was a game that we'd only seen once or twice before. I think he had alluded to RSL, and that might have been it, in the sense that they weren't competitive at all. Like they didn't do anything to threaten. They had one chance in the beginning of the second half, and that was it. And so trying to draw too many conclusions from Vancouver, I think, is just a fruitless effort in my eyes.
Well, yeah, I disagree. Go ahead.
No, also playing on turf. It's turf away match, but I thought Lund did pretty well, to be honest. Mm-hmm. Last point there, Phil.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think, and I guess I'm referring to the fallout, because I thought you guys, you know, as always, do a wonderful job recapping the game that was played against Vancouver. You guys do that every Monday, or the show comes out on a Monday. And, you know, the thing that stood out to me, and the reason I disagree that it's a bit of a throwaway or it doesn't mean anything as far as history, is because, like you guys said on that show, that we do have these random games, and every single time we've responded after. So to me, like, I see this as like not a problem. I know it sounded like I was creating a narrative there, but I think the break was needed. I think rotation was needed. I think, you know, you just reassured me when I listened to that show that being able to throw this game in the trash and to use it as fuel for the next game leading into the playoffs, I have faith that everything's going to be fine. Moreover, I'm actually excited to see what comes of the next game leading into the playoffs. So sorry about the narrative forming there, but I am positive. I did mean it in a positive way in the end there.
Yeah, and with the break too, I mean, it kind of can, and the reason it felt like a throwaway game too is the culmination of everything from the progression right before that, right? Of you start to get some point records and win records going here, and the conversation about being that best of all-time expansion team, you won the playoff spot, or you got the playoff spot, you clinched home field, and then you won the regular season conference, and that all happened before Vancouver. And so I think that's why it was just like, okay, we've done all this. If we beat Vancouver, we could get the all-time points record here before we even come back to City Park, but we didn't. We still control our own destiny in every sense of the imagination. And yeah, I think I don't know what specifically they took away from it, but there's definitely this is one of those break points that they've referenced before. Jake Nerwinski most recently referenced it in his press conference a couple weeks ago, where there have been moments this season where they hit the reset button and something doesn't go their way, like you said, Phil, and they have a chance to evaluate and move forward, whether it's move forward differently, move forward more purposefully, but they have a chance to mentally and physically reset. And I definitely think this is one of those moments.
And the thing that I absolutely saw coming was a quote that involved something like the gas pedal is full throttle from Carnell. And to see a little bit of fire in his eyes probably reflecting from the more fiery eyes during training sessions and stuff like that. So, no worries from this guy right here. I look forward to what the next game looks like. And, there's some motivation for these individual players. We have some really interesting news popping up this week. We're going to bury the lead a little bit on the Indiana Vassilev news, but we have this really interesting Pan Am Games announcement where Miguel Perez and Wenzel are both alternates for this game. And so, Matt, I think you were kind of doing research. You can kind of fill us in on the Pan Am Games. I had no clue what it was, so I'm actually interested to learn about this.
Yeah, and I feel this in and of itself kind of got buried underneath the story of Indiana Vassilev being called up for the U.S. Olympic team and Jabulu Blom being called up for the South African men's national team, because the Pan American Games are not something that have been on probably anyone's radar, minus maybe the most hardcore youth national team folks. The Pan American Games themselves are a continental multi-sport event for North and South America featuring Summer Olympic sports. For this edition of it, 18 players were picked to represent the U.S. at the 2023 Pan American Games. And this is our first appearance since 2007 for the U.S. It's an under-22 tournament featuring U.S. players born in 2002 to 2005. The U.S., who's taking a U19 squad, will kick off group stage action on October 23rd against Brazil, play Honduras on October 26th, and Colombia on October 29th. All this happening in Chile. And it's a kind of a condensed Olympics, condensed World Cup style tournament. There are 2 groups of 4 teams, and the top 2 finishers in each group are going to advance to a semifinal. The qualification of this may be one of the more fascinating pieces in how it ties to another piece of history. The U.S. qualified for this tournament with its performance at the 2022 CONCACAF U20 Championship, winning that for the 3rd straight time. And this was also the tournament that clinched the U.S.'s berth in the 2024 Olympic Games, first time that we'll return there since 2008. So it's also not something that we probably would have had on our radar, except for it's a St. Louis City sighting. Miguel Perez was named as a midfield alternate. Michael Wenzel was named as a defensive alternate, and they'll leave on Friday already to be off until early November with this group. So they're going to be traveling right alongside every other person who was named to this squad, training with them, getting the experience of going. It's exciting for both of them and kind of a merging of different paths. We know the Miguel Perez story. We know he just graduated high school here last May. We know his triumphant goal scoring at City Park. We know his rise through the academy up through City 2 and then earning a homegrown contract. But Michael Wenzel, who we've tried to raise the profile on our show as much as possible and continue to tout him as having played every minute for City 2. He's the captain for City 2. He was the captain of the academy teams he played for at Borussia Mönchengladbach. So we signed him from and I'm going to butcher the name, the Regionalliga division of Germany. And it seemed like he didn't have a lot of pomp and circumstance when he was signed because he was basically one of the first signings directly to City 2 for this past year. Remember, initially we thought, oh, is this a City signing? And seeing his credentials, it was a little lackluster. Pivot the narrative entirely, and especially after what we've seen from Michael Wenzel, Bradley Carnell had a quote today saying Wenzel has shown Defender of the Year qualities at Next Pro, and he's proof that good work gets rewarded at every single level. So to have Michael Wenzel, who is a dual national, represent the U.S. in this capacity, maybe even getting a chance to play if an injury occurs or something like that, but at the very least, getting the experience to go down to Chile and compete right alongside others of his age group, that's a fantastic opportunity and further reason why you should keep your eye on Michael Wenzel as a City fan.
Absolutely. And going as an American national, not a German national. So that was also kind of interesting. And, definitely, if you listen to this podcast, you know that we are touting him as one of the top players that could, as kind of Matt was alluding to, one of the top players that could get some senior minutes in the next season. Stuart, we both follow the national team pretty closely, and I think you probably know about that 2008 stat that the Olympic teams have not had luck in the United States. And we've seen the national team, the senior team, do well over the years, and it's been this youth. After a certain point, the U.S. just falls off a cliff, and the talent doesn't keep up with the rest of the world. That's right in that range. That U22, U19, U23 teams have been just terrible. And I didn't know how you felt about that or these call-ups here. I thought I'd give you a chance to talk about it.
So for the Pan Am Games, some of the other guys who got called up, they're not. This isn't a nobody roster that Wenzel and Perez are called in as alternates. Theodore Di Pietro for DC United was recently called by Wayne Rooney as the best young midfielder in MLS, I believe is what he said. Obviously, before Rooney jumped ship and went to Birmingham of the UK. But some other big names on the squad: Daniel Levia, Brooklyn Reigns, Reed Baker Whitting, Chituru Odunze, who formerly of Leicester City. So there's a lot of talent, and some of these guys have dropped off a little bit, but it's a very exciting roster for the Pan American team. However, for the Olympic squad, also fantastic. I was actually looking at the 20s in 2017. There is a friendly between the St. Louis FC U18s and the U.S. national team U17 club. And I think most of you guys will remember that one. It was a 1-1 draw that St. Louis FC U18s won on penalties with Seth Stiebel scoring. But wow. I go back and look at that roster every once in a while. And Josh Sargent captained the U.S. for that one. Akil Watts was the starting right back.
Oh, wow.
Indiana Vasilev came on in the 63rd minute, and John Hackworth was the coach of that team. Not to mention for St. Louis, guys like Aiden Stanley and Jack Marr started that match. And Jack Lynn, now of Orlando City, scored the tying goal. And for the U.S., Tony Temple scored. But I wasn't aware that Indiana Vasilev before tonight was on that roster. So I went back and looked, and because I was curious if anyone had asked Indiana if he remembers that match. So next press conference, that's a little bit of homework.
Oh my gosh. Absolutely. Man, what a time warp. I forgot about that game completely. And I just remember being like so weirded out that Sargent was captaining the national team against St. Louis. So weird. But what a crazy game in so many different ways. Even more ironic now. So cool, Stuart. I really enjoyed that. Thanks for bringing it up.
I mean, leave it up to Stu to dig back into the time capsule to that depth. I mean, the names, the specificity, that blows me away in how you're able to remember that level of depth about St. Louis soccer. And I absolutely love it.
Well, Justin Garces was the starting goalkeeper for the U.S. national team. That match, so many names you look through there. Blaine Ferry, a lot of guys who, the U.S. U20 World, the FIFA U20 World Cup was, I believe, 2017, and Sargent was the silver boot winner, I believe. He tied for the silver boot winner, but yeah, Vasilev and Watts were on that roster as well. So just kind of a fun St. Louis connection that all those guys were there.
I think Blaine Ferry's killing it for Tulsa, FC Tulsa, as a number 10 now, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, lots of good stuff there. Appreciate that. As I said, believe it or not, I called the next topic bearing the lead. Now I think that could be wrong at this point. But it is so exciting to me that Indiana Vasilev was called up to the Olympic team. And of course, we're all happy to see Blom get some attention for South Africa, getting a call up for a friendly over there, and, hopefully getting time and hopefully staying healthy, of course. But Matt, I know you've got some quotes on this as well.
Yeah, and it's not Blom's first time in this story, so he's almost just business as usual, right? He's been called up a few times while a member of St. Louis City. We hope that he plays. We're recording this on Thursday evening, and so he doesn't play until 11 a.m. Friday local time, so we won't find out. And he plays 2 matches in this window, just like Indiana does. Indiana's team does, anyway. And real quick, before I go into Indy and Blom, I do want to correct myself before it happens. After we publish this, that the roster for the Pan American Games, I mentioned the 2002 to 2005 timeframe. It's not a mostly U19 squad. It's being coached by the U19 head coach, Michael Sien. So just wanted to clear that up before 21-year-old Michael Wenzel gets questioned on how he's a part of the U19s.
Thank you.
Anyway, yeah, moving forward, I think so. Jabulu Blom, fantastic. We hope that he gets playing time, unlike the last time he was called up. But Indiana Vassilev, yeah, Stu mentioned his credentials for the youth national team go back a long time, and so with him having been named a part of this U.S. men's Olympic team domestic training camp in Phoenix, Arizona, he arrived on October 8th. He'll go until October 18th. The cutoff for this camp and for the Olympics is a birthday of January 1st, 2001. Vassilev just made this cutoff, being born February 16th, 2001. A lot of people, this was a wake-up call for a lot of City fans, not realizing he was only 22 years old and that he was able to qualify for this age group. And I think it kind of reframes a lot of what we know about Indiana Vassilev, who seems like the most fun-loving guy in the world. He seems so calm and so at home in everything he does. But the fact that he's been a part of the youth national team for so long, when he was 15 years old, he earned his first U.S. national team or youth national team call up for the U16s. And he's amassed 33 games played for the youth national team with 5 goals during that time between the 16s, the 17s, the 18s, and the 20s. And in fact, he helped lead the U17s to the U17 World Cup quarterfinals. He's a guy who's well-versed in the youth national team, and it's good to see him back on this stage facing the Mexican U23s like they did the other day, facing the Japanese U23s next week on October 17th. The downside, though, I think you'd have to look at is the first match against Mexico was on Wednesday night. And while nobody saw it because it wasn't being streamed or broadcast, the live tweeting, the post by the youth national team's Twitter account, Indiana Vassilev was the only outfield player who didn't make an appearance. And so there's a hope that he will see time on Tuesday, and that the rotation and whatever idea they had to get some of the other guys who maybe had attended more camps is what I'm thinking. But definitely hope to see Indy on Tuesday against the Japanese, and hope to see him go a decent amount, because it's Tuesday and we won't play a City game until that next Saturday. That length of time, and we've talked about these midweek matches so many times this year, that length of time has been called by Carnell as no problem as far as regen, recovery. So I would think that him seeing time, 45 minutes, 60 minutes, whatever it ends up being, is only going to be seen as a positive for his fitness going into Saturday's game. We're going to talk about lineups here in a few minutes, but I think I would actually be more concerned if Indy did not see game time, because that would mean he would have had the full 2.5 weeks off without this opportunity to scrimmage in a game situation like City is giving their squad this Saturday. So it's a lot of positives just for him to be there. There's also the concern about him not playing, which is a very short-term concern. And then Carnell did speak about Indy on the press conference Thursday, saying it's, again, great recognition of great work performed by Indy. Carnell even spit out some really interesting stats when just asked about Indy off the cuff, saying Indy's been involved in our 8 clean sheets, meaning he's been on the field during those games. And he's accounted for, been on the field for 56 of their 62 points, or 56 of their points, rather, of their, and so Indy playing a part in earning all of these points. I was mixing up goals with points there. We have 62 goals. Carnell is saying that we'll never stand in someone's way, reiterating a lot about Indy that he did for Blom earlier, because with this camp, it's not just a one and done camp or a January men's national team camp. If you're being called into this camp, you're being looked at for the Olympic roster. And so for Carnell to release Indy and for Indy to go and spend this time here, it's not just the 10 days now, but it's looking ahead to next year, as when the Olympic team leaves and they're gone for a month or however long they're gone for. I haven't looked at the schedule. Indy's going to be missing from the City roster for that entire time. And so for Carnell to give him the green light on this, has to put away any conversations that people might have had regarding Jabulu Blom earlier this year, when you remember that the kerfuffle earlier this spring about Blom when he had COVID and was recovering, and we didn't release him to national team, and there was the back and forth. Indy is the example of the long-term planning here, of you're willing to have let a guy go to camp. You're not going to stand in anyone's way. This is proof to Carnell's words that in the foreseeable future next year, Indy may be with the Olympic team. Hopefully he's still earned that spot. and we might be out of Indy's services for a few weeks or a month next year. But it's nothing but exciting for Indy ultimately.
We are Flyover Footy. You're listening on the Big 550 KTRS. Thanks for joining us. And yeah, as we talk about Indiana Vasilevs and Jabulo Blom's call-ups to their national teams for different reasons here, Stuart, I thought I'd give you a chance to kind of give your thoughts on the two getting their call-ups.
Well, I was slightly surprised not to see Jackson maybe get a look as an alternate for the call-up. I thought he's done very well. But Indy was, as Matt said, regular with the youth national teams for a long time. He came through the Aston Villa academy system. I think when he was here in St. Louis, he hadn't played a Premier League match yet, but he broke through with the Premier League team in 2019, was it? I believe.
I think his first appearance was the FA Cup, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but I thought he played a Premier League match as well. But
He has, yes. Yeah, his first appearance was the FA Cup, but he has appeared in a Premier League match.
Okay, yeah, because he mentioned the FA Cup during the U.S. Open Cup press conference that you asked him about.
Yeah.
But no, it's always exciting. You always want to represent your country and do well. Patrick Schulte getting called in as a goalkeeper was great. And if you're going to go to the Olympics, going to Paris is certainly a fantastic location. So best of luck to all of them. I am very curious about the overagers because you're allowed to have 3 overagers on your roster, and currently none of them were in camp, I believe. I think it was all qualified players. So that's where I think the intrigue will be.
Agree. And I agree about, Akil Watts. That's kind of, you led into what I wanted to mention, and just like how the national team will use Indiana Vasilev. To be fair, he's a bit of a multi-tool for Carnell to some degree, but I think he's really settled into that double pivot role of some kind with St. Louis, or, playing as an 8 in a diamond formation. And the national team's mostly used him as like a forward. And so it'll be interesting to see how they use him. We do get the next game is streamed, thank goodness. So I hope he starts. I hope they were holding him out because they were going to give him at least 60 minutes or more in the next game. That's what I'm hoping was the case, and not that he's on the outs looking in. But I think it's possible. There was a few weeks in this season where he was playing the 10, and City looked great. And if you think about how Berhalter used wingers in the beginning of his tenure with the national team, it was always a folded in winger who acted somewhat like a 10. In fact, he even called them dual 10s. And then the fullbacks would provide the width. And so if you see Vasilev lined up as a winger, don't freak out. He's probably going to be folded in, looking more like a 10 than he is a winger. But we'll see. We'll see, right? I hope he doesn't go in as a pure number 11 or number 7. I just think he's going to be better because he's just got that like central midfielder spatial awareness kind of thing going on. And he's really good at throwing in a switch, which I think works better from the middle of the field. So those are things that I would look for with Indiana Vasilev. And just quickly, I want to just mention that Jabulo Blom, this first game, which is tomorrow, as Matt was saying, from the day we're recording, is against Eswatini, is not a massive African nation. And so the next game is going to be Ivory Coast, which is a massive footballing nation in Africa. And so I'm curious to see if he starts, which team he starts with, because I think that'll show us where he is on the depth chart for South Africa. So if he starts just against Eswatini and gets no time with Ivory Coast, we kind of know where he stands. But if he gets more time with Ivory Coast, I think that means that they rate him and are willing to give him some time out there. And I look forward to that. So.
Yeah, and as we pivot to the next topic of looking ahead to what kind of City lineups might look like over the next few matches, because we know Seattle's not it. I think Indy and Blom are good kind of pivots to that because of you're mentioning his positional versatility for Indiana Vasilev and the importance of Jabulo Blom. Before we get into that really quick, I do want to mention for those listening to us on the Big 550 KTRS, tune into our wind down on our podcast, which we have right after this portion airs on our podcast, because we will be giving away our first ever ticket giveaway that we have 2 tickets to the Decision Day matchup for the Seattle Sounders. And we're going to be announcing the winner on our podcast during the wind down. So if you've replied to our social media posts, get ready, tune in. We'll be reaching out when we have this, but if you want to hear it, it'll be on our podcast during the wind down to start off that portion. Be probably around 45 minutes into that. But Phil, I would like to pivot to the lineups, because who doesn't like to guess on what kind of lineups we might have roll out for the last few games? And
this is where we really shine, if I'm being honest. If I were to pat us on the back, this is where I think we really get into it.
So this is where we're not going to nerd out here. So I don't want to say we're going deep, but we're going analytically. We're looking at history and trends and trying to get into the mind of Bradley Carnell and what he's going to feel. I think it's fair to say, it's more than fair to say, that Bradley Carnell has ridden trends of starting 11s throughout this season. We know that we've had 25, 26 plus, maybe approaching 30 at this point, different sets of lineups with 1 or 2 players differing here and there. Obviously, Ben Lund started against Vancouver, so that was a brand new lineup, that kind of a thing. But if you look at what Carnell's motive operandi is, it's to ride the hot hands or the hot feet, the healthy feet, and those just overall in form. If you're playing and you're earning city wins, then you're going to continue to play. Indiana Vassilev, having been on the field during those 8 clean sheets, the 57 points, I think it was, or 56 points, all of those show the importance of Indiana Vassilev. But he's not the only person, especially recently. So thinking back to the beginning of the year when you had Johnny Nelson, you had Jake Nerwinski, you had Klaus, Leuven, you had those guys. Nico Gioacchini broke through, then Indiana Vassilev broke through. And then with San Jose, you had Sam Adeniran, AZ Jackson, Josh Yaro, and Akil Watts break through. They had their stretch. Let's look at the last 5 games or so on what City's been able to roll out. Because if you look at the games, even starting with the LA Galaxy, but specifically looking from the Houston Dynamo September 16th match up until Vancouver. And we even say Vancouver, I called it a throwaway, but if you look at who started that match, it wasn't that much of a rotation. And so I'm counting that as part of this trend. You look at the formations we've gone out, you look at the players, and the numbers that I pulled, because I'm not going to list all of those lineups. I'm going to list the takeaways. The numbers I pulled of our last 5 matches, Berkey has started 4 of them. I think he's a lock for starting against Seattle. That's obvious. Anthony Markanic has started 4 of them. Joakim Nilsson has started 3 of them. Tim Parker started 4 of our last 5. Jake Nerwinski has started 4 of our last 5. Edu Leuven, 4 of our last 5. Jabulu Blom, all 5 of our last 5. Indiana Vassilev, AZ Jackson, Sam Adeniran, and Jacques Klaus, 3 out of the last 5, they've all started. If you go back to the match before that, our 6th to last match against the LA Galaxy, the only difference between that and the LAFC match that saw essentially the same lineup except for Watts for Nerwinski, Jared Stroud then enters the conversation of right there at the 3 out of 5. So you're seeing a very consistent lineup the past 5-6 games. And so those names that I listed are just as likely as anybody to actually be our starting 11 against Seattle, in my eyes.
This chart makes it, we've got it right in front of us here. Matt made a nice chart for us. It makes it really easy to kind of look at this and see some trends. Stuart, anything sticking out to you about what Matt just said?
No, not really. I think the lineup, well, what do you think about the right back? Are we going to see Nerwinski?
That is exactly what stood out to me the most, I would say, is that, and I just have a strong thought about this one, is like seeing Nerwinski in there and seeing Watts kind of back off, I think is also coincided with seeing Markanic take more than a defensive role at the fullback position, that really bombing forward more and more each game. And I think that perhaps we see Carnell kind of leaning toward Nerwinski or a defensive fullback. You could even argue the same, that once Watts became this typical starter, we were seeing a lot of Hebert at the left back position. And so I think we see like a tendency here that if Markanic is going to bomb forward, we're going to see a little bit more Nerwinski. But I don't know if that's kind of true per se, but it just feels kind of right if you look at trends throughout the season. But I cut you off there, Stu, because I was really excited to kind of mention that. Any other thoughts on the fullback there or any of the other positions?
Well, just looking at when Nerwinski had a rough match against Seattle away. He had an own goal in that match. I think that was his lowest rated. If you go by like FOTMob and those scores of the season, he had like a 5 or below 5. Not a very good match. So honestly, give Nerwinski, he's in great form. Give him a chance to
Well,
win it back.
on the Nerwinski piece too, aside from him, in that's a perfect example of you have Jake going the first third of the season, then you have Akil taking the right back spot, and then Jake lately has come back on to reclaim it, so to speak. The last time we played Seattle, we ran 5 in the back. We ran Johnny Nelson, Kyle Hebert, Tim Parker, Lucas Bartlett, Jake Nerwinski. And that was as much of a parking the bus situation against Seattle as I think we've had up until that time. We lost 3-0, so I don't look to that match necessarily as anything to take away for how we're going to approach them at City Park. But I do see these recent results and the potential that Jake has had, especially with a returning Klaus. I can't reinforce enough how well a guy like Jake Nerwinski and the service that he delivers into the box benefits a guy like Klaus. The goal that he scored against Minnesota is exhibit A in how well they can work together and how much Klaus needs somebody to just be able to deliver service and know exactly where to place the ball. That's what Jake Nerwinski can offer very specifically. I think Akil Watts, when he pushes high, he offers a lot of different versatility, different options that he can do, pushing even higher up to the end line. I just like what Jake can offer in delivering service, but also being defensive minded to balance out Anthony Markanek. And this is where the waterfall gets the snowball effect of Anthony Markanek, to me, has taken that left back spot. If you're going to have an attacking minded left back, you need to have a more defensive minded right back. We have been so successful throughout this year when we've had that kind of asynchronous attack and defensive minded right back that balances out a left back that can push forward, or vice versa. A Kyle Hebert at left back with an Akil Watts at right back worked well earlier in the year. I just think you need one of those options.
Absolutely. Matt, do you want to get anything in before we kind of wrap this up? You made this chart. I feel like you're the one that needs to share the info that we got.
I'm going to post the chart because it's kind of really raw a little bit, but I think people will get an idea. I tried to share my screen just now on the stream and it did not work. So apologies for that. But I will get this out on the Flyover account on Friday so everybody can see what I put together and look at that as you listen to this. It is what it is. We'll talk about this a little more next week. But I do also want to talk about this weekend really quick before we go, because City is in action, so to speak, an intra-squad scrimmage this weekend where Carnell has said the priorities are just to prep for Seattle. Simple as that. He's putting City 2, and Carson Locker from the academy in, and he likened this weekend to back in 2014, and I kid you not, he said this. In 2014, when Germany won the World Cup, they brought a U20 team to travel with them and train with that team as if they were the opponent that they would be facing and use that to prep. That's exactly what we're doing with this, using them as a tool and an element to train for Seattle. That's what's happening this weekend for City.
Absolutely. There's so much going on. We've got another week, but we got before the game here, but we have so much Olympic Games stuff going on. It's going to be so much fun to kind of prepare for this during the international window, build up, be watching social media here with City. We are Flyover Footy. So please look us up while you're looking at all that stuff. We've got content just constantly going through. We have the wind down coming up next if you listen to the podcast. So please look us up there. Join us on the podcast. The wind down is lots of fun. We'd love to see you there. Thanks for listening, everybody, on the Big 550 KTRS. We'll see you next time. 24 seconds over. That's not too bad.
Of 40 minutes?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, that's the best we've ever done.
Well, I was pretty strict. I was pretty strict there at the end. So,
hey, if we get offered a better time spot, then we'll stay strict.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to be honest, like I was starting to get stricter, but then Pat was like, no, give me extra minutes. It's fine. So I was like, okay, no problem.
Cool. Well, I'm gonna go grab a drink for the wind down, and then we'll get into the giveaway.
Be right back.
I need to watch that City Voice with Indiana Vasilov. He's one of my favorite players, so that's going to be really good. He has a lot of history, and he's a hilarious guy.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just looking right now. So Tim Ream's podcast is great, but he interviewed Gio Reyna, and oh man, I can't get over Claudio and Kristen and what they did. That's just...
Did they talk about it? There's no way they talked about it.
Yeah, no, they didn't talk about the instance, but Gio talked about like family, which obviously, Claudio and Kristen,
right,
hugely successful, but I mean, my opinion on them is pretty harsh.
I mean, I think most people's are, right?
Yeah, I would say I wouldn't want Claudio to be associated with U.S. national team for a decade or so. And,
yeah, that's going to be a long cooling off period.
Yeah, I think, but honestly, you play with, or he's your dad and your mom. It's going to be different for Gio, but it is what it is. Guys, for the fallout, I'm gonna have to, or wind down. I'm gonna have to drop off.
Oh.
Thanks for joining us, man. I appreciate it.
Didn't even let us prep for it.
No, I've been up since 4 a.m. this morning.
Oh, dude, yeah, get some sleep.
Yeah, Felicity decided that she wants to not sleep throughout the night anymore. So 3 to 4. Then about 4 to 5, but I don't know.
I remember it.
Coughing, sneezing. She likes. Big thing is she loves to bang her head against the headboard.
Yeah.
For like a long time.
Doesn't scare the hell out of you?
Yeah, it scares me, but also she's prepping for those headers. She's prepping for CTE, but she's also prepping for those head balls. She's still 95th percentile in height. So,
wow.
Center back material. She's not afraid to go up for the header. She'll have, she won't have good pace from me, but maybe.
I mean, she might have the make for a keeper. You gotta be watching out for that.
True.
Yeah. No, I was a decent keeper, so maybe. Sarah never played any football, so we'll see. But I'm gonna drop off and let me know who wins that draw. I'm very excited.
Yeah. Good luck with Felicity, man. It's a tough period.
Oh yeah, I will be asleep within 10 minutes.
Yep. Please. See you, man.
See you, Stu.
Always a pleasure.
As well. Good guy, that Stu.
Good guy, that Stu. Who doesn't love Stu?
You ready? I think you got to be chomping at the bit for this.
I am. I'm nervous we're gonna screw it all up on the recording somehow. I mean,
I'm relying on you. All I got to do is look at a number.
You got to look. Yeah, we'll explain it when we go.
Yeah.
You let me know when we're ready, and I'll intro us.
I will.
You can intro us.
I got the spreadsheet ready to go. I'm gonna hit record, and we'll go. Welcome everyone to the wind down. I will burp off mic because I took my drinks of my beer already.
Well, this is an exciting way to start the wind down because in typical us fashion, I feel we just kind of dove into it at the beginning of the pod where we don't do a great job of like setting the stage for what all we're going to talk about. And part of it, I think, is we've got a flow that we usually do on the show, right? Like we do our on the main show, we do our thoughts from the previous game, our takeaways, player news, preview, all of that stuff. We've got a pretty standard format.
Yeah, there's no mystery about how we're gonna flow our main part of our show usually.
This week though, I don't know how many people expected. If you saw Justin Horniker's article from his Twitter, you saw the info of Michael Wenzel and Miguel Perez, but I don't know how many people actually knew the details of the Pan American Games. Kind of just tucked that one away, like you said earlier, burying the lead. And then we didn't even plug the giveaway at the beginning of the show. That's my fault. That is entirely my fault, because I have been looking forward to this for over a week now. And the anonymous, very, very kind person who donated these to us, these single game tickets to us, has just been the greatest person to work with or talk to make this happen. And there was no like, you have to do this or I want you to do this. It was like, I want somebody to go to this game. I have these. I love listening to you guys. And if you want to do this kind of giveaway, if you're interested. So we talked and we said, yeah, that would be fantastic. And if we can do some good, if we can have some people either donate or espouse different charitable organizations in St. Louis, we wanted to have that happen. And so I was actually very encouraged by and I posted 4 links out there to places that the Luligans have donated to for their charity du jour that I'm familiar with, like the Crisis Nursery, the Food Bank, the Bennett Project, those kinds of things. And so to see people get multiple entries to this giveaway because they said they donated or donate regularly to some charitable organization or to like public radio or something like that, where differences are being made in our community through this effort, or just people are aware of other people donating, which, you know, that helps a lot too. And so it was great to see that. And if you did that, you earned yourself another entry into this giveaway. And so we had a whole lot of people who have 2 entries and excited for that. We had a huge number of people, well over 100 more people than I actually anticipated and expected to be able to figure out how we were going to do this, but we figured it out. And what's going to happen is I have a random number generator that has 1 through the number of people who have entered this on Instagram and on Twitter. And Phil has all of the tags, the accounts, and listed out. So I'm going to use the random number generator and I will say what number that is. Phil's going to look at the sheet and Phil's going to call out the account.
I dropped the ball. We should have like Champions League music playing while we do this or something. It's like a draw.
That's okay. Well, that would be kind of funny. No cheesy drum roll, but I'm going to press the button. So Phil, you ready?
Ready.
34.
Scrolling to 34. Ben Krumsig.
Ben Krumsig.
With a K. Krumsieg.
I think that's a Twitter one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go find that account, Ben Krumsig. Got him.
This is great because you and I we're not close to this man, so there's no bias here. There's no fear of bias.
It's true. So what we also will do is, just in case we can't reach this person, let's do 2 more.
Okay.
Just in case, because I like to have backups. I don't want to have to come back here and say, what do we do now? So I'm going to do another number. 80.
Ooh, 80. Scrolling.
0.
Edwin Butler 3.
I don't know this person personally, but I do recognize the name, Edwin Butler 3. So Edwin's number 2. If we can't get a hold of Ben, it'll be Edwin. I think Edwin is the one who, I believe he posts a lot about, I know he's a huge City fan. He posts on a lot of our stuff. So yeah, retweeting guys like Ben Wright, good guy automatically because of that.
Absolutely.
All right, 1 more. Okay, you ready?
Mm-hmm.
25.
25 is Eric STL6. We did it.
Eric STL6. Okay, yep, he's on Twitter as well. And now his Twitter description, not blast the guy, but it looks like he might work at Side Project or Perennial.
Ooh. We need to be friends, is what this
means. I hadn't planned for this, but just the fact that we're doing 3 names. I don't want somebody's name to get called out and they're like, oh, maybe I'll get something. Maybe I won't. I'm going to reach out to all 3 of them for something, like whether it's a scarf or a bag or something that we have that's extra that like we can give you just for being a part of this. Like I feel that would be, let's do that.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
we'll reach out to Ben first, who if he's responsive in the next day or 2 or 3 for the tickets, and if he can take them, we'll do that. For the other guys, for Eric and for Edwin, we'll reach out to one way or another.
Sounds great.
So thank you everybody for being a part of this. Thank you for the posts, the comments, and letting us know who you want to score against Seattle. Hopefully everybody's dreams come true and they all score, and we actually finally do reach that 9-0 win, because that would be pretty fun. And we'll keep doing more of these. So we did the ball giveaway. We've got these 2 tickets here for Seattle. Be on the lookout for more things like this in the future, because they're fun and we like to engage with everybody, and it's just a fun thing to do for the St. Louis soccer community. Yeah, and we appreciate you all.
The nonprofit wrinkle was really awesome. That was a good idea, Matt. I love that. I love especially the ones that were like local nonprofits. That was really fun. We've got stuff developing. We're just now starting to kind of get our feet under us after this first big year of being part of KTRS, and we're just looking to start partnering up with the community. And it's really important to us that it's community driven and not, corporate national kind of stuff. So
yeah,
look forward to that kind of stuff.
That has been one thing that's been fun this year, is just feeling the growth and the growth around us, and just getting to be a part of it all, because we've been doing this. You've been doing this since 2015, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've been a part of it since 2019 with Santi and Stu. And a lot of people, when I'd say that, they ask like, what did you do before City? And it was, oh, well, St. Louis FC. And there's still been soccer. There's national team stuff to talk about. There was the Academy for City. There was City 2. There's been always something St. Louis soccer related to talk about. But this year has enabled us to kind of expand this kind of thing, where it's not just getting into the nitty gritty or covering all the news, and making sure that if you want to know something about St. Louis soccer, whether it's SLU or City or St. Louis FC or whatever, you can tune to us and feel pretty good about the fact that you'll be caught up on stuff. It's this back and forth, being a part of a larger community of, I think there's almost like 20 soccer podcasts in St. Louis. It is incredible the amount of passion that exists here, and the people that just want to talk about it on the regular basis. And to be a part of that it's humbling when people say that we're a podcast they listen to. And it makes me want to do these kinds of things more, because it's just a constant back and forth high of, I love doing this. I love talking about it. I love digging into things. And I love when people mention to me at games that they listen to Flyover. It's just, those things all are just so amazing to me.
Yeah, you guys spoil us. I always have this fear in the back of my head of this imposter syndrome of we're going to ask a question or we're going to do a giveaway and then like 5 people participate. I get so scared of that, because that's been my past, to be honest. And the fact that we get so much interest, man, you guys are so great. We're very lucky. So thank you so much. We mentioned Ben Wright there for a second, and he's one of the, to move on. Is it okay to move on here, Matt?
Yeah, we are good.
All right, sweet. Thanks. Mentioned Ben Wright there, and it just reminded me of, the next topic. Ben Wright's the one that kind of stuck out to me, because he was the first one I saw putting out these end of the year awards, kind of MVP kind of votes that he turned into the league. And I think Sasha Kleshtin stood out to me. And I was actually, you get this, speaking of imposter syndrome, like you get this feeling that you're in St. Louis. I felt this way about like Nelly and why am I not thinking of like local bands when I was in the music scene? It's like you hear them on the point every single day. And then you're like, oh, they're huge. This is a massive band. And then you like get on the world stage and you either find out they're bigger than you thought, which is what Nelly was. I thought he was just a local guy. And then I found out he was huge everywhere. Or you like find out that maybe they're not as big as you thought on the national stage, because they get so much local play. So seeing these MVP votes, seeing so many City players in these MVP votes being turned into MLS, it made me so happy. Like, I'm already proud of this club, but to see people actually think that our players are worth that kind of a vote made me very happy.
Very humbling, because it's one of those things that kind of took me by surprise. Is we talked on one of our last shows about the specific names that have been nominated, including AZL Jackson for the youngster or the young player.
Yeah.
Surely it wasn't called youngster. But Josh Yarrow for the MLS Works, the humanitarian aspect of it, and seeing other names that Berkey for goalkeeper, you almost expect at this point. And then you have like Carnell and
Yeah.
Tim Parker, I think, are the other two most likely. But the number of people, like when you actually see pen to paper and you see these posts of all these analysts, Ben Wright included, who are like, they get votes. And we know that it's a third media, a third front office, and a third players. Like all of these votes matter. And you're seeing Berkey goalkeeper all over the place. You're seeing Carnell as a head coach all over the place. You're even seeing some Berkey MVPs from non-St. Louis people. You're seeing a lot of Edu Leuven as newcomer of the year. That's another big one that we're seeing. And then Tim Parker as defender of the year. These are going to be close races. You have other players who are very much in this race, whether you want to call Messi a true newcomer of the year in that regard, or I almost don't even try the name Giacampus from Atlanta. As a newcomer of the year, or you could look at any of these other players outside of Edu Leuven, but to know the impact Leuven has had and is being recognized nationally, that's really cool.
Even to be on the same list as those other two, that's pretty massive.
Yeah. And the big thing that I've been seeing is the coach of the year. That's the most interesting one to me. I can almost, and this is coming from a St. Louis slant, so I do like to be checked if any of my facts are wrong, but I see legitimate number one for Berkey. I would be upset if he didn't get goalkeeper of the year, regardless of what anybody says about Daniel or trying to pull one specific stat as opposed to the larger swath and the versatility of stats. Because again, Justin Horniker posted something in regard to it was XGA or something, that Daniel was on top of Berkey as the only keeper on top of Berkey, but Berkey also had the number of goal contributions or expected goal contributions, basically where his actions led to us scoring. And that number is far and away ahead of any other goalkeeper. And so Berkey's on the ball and his defensive actions in tandem make him a no-brainer goalkeeper. Tim Parker, I think, is the defender of the year that shocked a lot of people, but he's getting a lot of votes. Matt Miazga is getting a lot of votes as well from what we've seen. People post their public ballots. And I can make arguments for any of those guys, but Bradley Carnell for coach of the year, I will fight this argument until my dying breath that there's no sane justification for why Pat Noonan should get this over Bradley Carnell.
I want to hear this.
And it's simple. It's very simple. And it boils down to the fact that you don't give coach of the year for what you've done over 2 seasons to turn around the worst team in the history of MLS. What Pat Noonan has done in his tenure has been nothing short of remarkable, but it's been over 2 years. And one person commented to me that they understand my argument, but they feel so passionately because they want to see Noonan recognized for the work that he's done to turn this franchise around. And I get it. I totally get it. If I was a Cincy fan, I would want Pat Noonan to be recognized somehow for the way he's been able to turn around a 3-time wooden spoon team to jump up to 5th in the conference, 10th in the league, and then win the Supporter Shield the next year. But the problem for this voting is that his coach of the year, 2023, what the expectations were coming into this year for FC Cincinnati were playoff team, potential Supporter Shield contender. Like, these were legitimate expectations that FC Cincinnati had because of the work that Noonan put in last year. When you finish the previous season 5th in your conference and 10th overall, and then you jump into Supporter Shield winners the next year, that's not anything to write home about when on the larger scale. That's par for the course for a lot of MLS teams. New England Revolution, LAFC, the past 2 years, they've done more year over year than what Pat Noonan has done. They finished outside the top 10 overall and then jumped up to win the Supporter Shield. So Pat Noonan right there hasn't done anything historic. He's just done a remarkable job in a 2-year period to turn around the worst team in the history of MLS. But that isn't enough to singularly look at this year and say he's coach of the year. Bradley Carnell, on the other hand, has taken a team that didn't exist before, a team that was universally picked to finish last, and in his first year as a head coach, has won a regular season conference. That in and of itself, like, there's no other argument that's needed. You don't need to go stats. You don't need to go game by game. The fact that St. Louis beat Cincinnati head to head, you don't need to look at that. You can, but you don't need to. It's as simple as that. In what Carnell did this year compared to expectations, compared to his history as a head coach, compared to what St. Louis was before this, it's a no-brainer. And the only argument that I have seen somebody put out there that they feel has some weight, and I can kind of see their point. I can't agree with them, but I can see the point, is the claim that FC Cincinnati, and this again goes to, remember, this is a coach of the year for 2023. The claims by Cincinnati fans are Cincinnati had 9 months to build from when they were awarded a team to when they started the league. St. Louis City had 3 years from 2019 or fall 2019 to spring 2023.
That's interesting.
It's that one singular thing that Cincinnati fans are pointing to as to why what Pat Noonan has done this year is more important and more historic and more award worthy than what Bradley Carnell has done. And if you notice, that is taking not just 1 year of history, not 2, but 5 years of history into account. They're just wanting their coach to be recognized for the fact that they were the worst team in the history of MLS. And pulling stats from 5 years ago, and I could poke holes all day long about why the fact that City was awarded a team in 2019 and they started in 2023, we're talking pandemics, we're talking the fact that they didn't need to tell MLS, yeah, we can start this next year, as a prerequisite for their joining, because you remember that the GM for Cincinnati, the owner of Cincinnati, their part of their pitch to MLS was that they were ready to go from USL, that they could start in the next year because they had the stadium, they were playing in Nippert, they had the team that had just crushed USL, if you remember that. I know you do. And that they were ready to make the jump. That was part of their pitch. That was why they were awarded a team after St. Louis's vote failed in 2018. It had nothing to do with the fact that they were forced into anything. So cry to your owners if you don't like the fact that it was 9-month runway. You did that to yourself as a way for you to get a team. St. Louis didn't need to make that prerequisite. They were going to start in 2022 from that 2019 bid, but then the pandemic happened and it was pushed back a year. And yeah, it worked for the organization, but when you're talking about a coach of the year and what they were able to do, no, if you think that was a reason for saying, oh yeah, nobody should be surprised at what City did this year, then you're completely discarding every single national media ballot and prediction coming into this year. If you really think that the runway St. Louis had set us up for success and it was obvious from the get-go and everybody should have saw it coming, then why did everybody pick us to finish last when they knew that we had that multi-year runway? It's because it doesn't matter. You can't sign players before a year or two in advance of your season. None of that matters. It's this year's the work that Bradley Carnell has done compared to expectations, compared to his longevity as a head coach, first-year head coach, first-year team, winning the conference, period, end of story. For this year, it's obvious it's Bradley Carnell.
I think your argument is without fallacy. And I think your biggest argument, like, to win, like, if you just want to shut out arguments, the semantics of it being just this year, I think you win. I don't disagree with anything you said, and I don't think anyone can argue with you, actually. But just for, like, conversational sake, because, I don't like to be too one-sided.
I know you don't.
I'm just, like, in my mind, I think the interesting conversation is it harder to start with an expansion team, or is it harder to come back from that wooden spoon for 3 years? So that's a fun conversation to me. I don't even necessarily want to have that right now, but I do think both are very difficult to come back from. And I think the St. Louisan in me loves to recognize both Pat Noonan and City for both of those feats that are extremely difficult. I would say they're both groundbreaking in their own ways in MLS. If I wanted to twist the knife against Cincy, is like, it's groundbreaking because you dug yourself such a deep fucking grave and had to dig yourself out of it. You had to hire a St. Louisan to get back out of it. So
I knew it. Of all the things, it's FC Cincinnati that gets us to drop the F-bomb in the wind down.
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. It comes right out of me. I can do it in the wind down. Are we okay with this? Do I need to start bleeping these out? It might happen from time to... Okay, good.
We're fine in the wind down.
DMs are open if your kid's listening. I need to fix that. But the other thing is I hadn't heard that argument about like us starting early, and I love that they were trying to use that as like an excuse for I don't know. To me, that's like all the more reason we like everyone. Can add that to the blueprint going forward for expansion because it was so smart to do. Like it is so funny that it's being used as a negative connotation. It's pretty funny to me.
If that's the negative connotation, then let's go back and look at previous runways, because you're looking at the problem with the comparisons is that no team has done what Cincinnati has done. And I mean this in I guess I'm meaning this in a not too negative way, but from their fans' perspective and I guess players' perspective, no team has said, yeah, we're ready to go 9 months from now. And we can start in league play. We're going to be fine. And you can even find some Jeff Birding quotes, the GM from Cincinnati and now part owner, where he was saying at the time, it's okay I'm paraphrasing. It's okay if we don't immediately set the world on fire, if we don't win every game immediately. Like, it's going to be a growing process. He was already setting his fans up for, you get your foot in the door, you're in the league, and then it'll eventually happen. And he was right. Eventually it happened 5 years later. But you had to go through 3 of the worst seasons in the history of the league that I can't honestly see being matched. I don't ever see a team having a 3-year period, expansion or not, that was as bad as what they did. But they knew what they were getting into, and their ownership and their GM and their front office knew what they were getting into. They just wanted to have their foot in the door. And that's another reason why I don't necessarily like the comparison, because COVID is one of the reasons that City had the extra year. Charlotte had an extra year to build because of COVID. They were going to come in a pretty quick time frame because they had an NFL ready stadium that they could play soccer in, or a soccer stadium that they played. I don't know. They were ready to come in the league pretty quickly. They had a year delay. You had Austin had a pretty good runway. LAFC had a pretty good runway. Like, nothing was like 9 months. And so you're the unicorn in this conversation when you're saying you're comparing City to you're the one that's the aberration of 9 months. And you can't make an accurate comparison saying that City had things better than any other MLS, any other expansion team, when you were the biggest outlier in all of that.
Yeah. And, I've always thought about this too. When I start having to vote for goalkeepers, best goalkeepers every year, especially in the USL, typically the best goalkeeper was a Bob Lilly, Pittsburgh Riverhound, or, the Rhinos. And so it's like, well, yeah, that guy won because he had such a good defense. Like, all of the other 10 players' biggest job, including the striker, was to make sure there wasn't a goal scored, even more so than scoring goals. You know what I mean? So of course this man won, or whatever the goalkeeper was for Bob Lilly won like pretty much every year. So, I mean, it's changed now. I won't go into that, but anyway, so that's like the asterisk in at least USL voting for best goalkeeper of the year. And I think you have to mention, when you think about FC Cincinnati, and by no means am I saying there's an asterisk next to Carnell, because I think he's been amazing this year.
Yeah.
Even seeing his growth and how quality he's been and not making wrong moves at the end of this season. Oh my goodness. I love it. I would vote for this man every day of the year. But to look at what it took for FC Cincinnati to recover, it took a total change of the top. The problem wasn't necessarily the coaching in Cincinnati. They had to change their entire upper organization. They had to change that GM and bring in the right players, and maybe even the right look at how to set up tactically. they had to change everything. They kept going with these Dutch GMs that didn't know the league, I guess. I don't even want to start thinking about what they did wrong. But the point here being that Carnell having Lutz Pfannenstiel and the rest of our sporting crew on his side, I think has been a massive help, right? And I think that's part of the story here. And I think that's part of the story for Pat Noonan as well.
Well, when you've been given the trust that Carnell has been given by Lutz Pfannenstiel, it sets you up for success. And it's not just an on the field thing, but it's an organizational culture. And we've talked a lot about what Carolyn Kindle has provided for this organization in hiring Lutz, and the trust that she's shown in what Lutz can make this club, not just from on the field, but the facilities were designed in part by Lutz from his experience in Europe. Every single piece of this organization, from hires to structures, pyramids from top to bottom in the youth outreach and the community outreach, all of it has Lutz fingerprints on it. And Bradley Carnell is set up to succeed because of what Lutz has allowed him to do. Lutz helped bring in a lot of the right people, but Carnell being hired so early on, a year in advance of the MLS season, allowed him to learn the organization, learn the culture, be set up for success. That's the biggest difference in what Cincinnati had done versus what Lutz and Bradley have done, is being set up for success, setting yourself up for success. And the fact that they had the wherewithal to do that heading into this particular season, it's not a pro or con to the award itself of Coach of the Year. It's just the background on why Bradley Carnell is going to win it.
Completely agree with that. I guess I wonder, like, I've been trying to figure out, he's South African too, the first MLS coach for FC Cincinnati. I cannot find his name. It starts with a K. But, you know, like, he went to, you wonder how well he would have done with a good team. And he went to the Rapids after Cincinnati. So, like, the man never got a fair shake in this league, let's be honest. But anyway, it's just something I kind of think about. But, you know, either way, props to what you just said is exactly right. We got such
Alan
a good
Koch.
setup here. Sorry?
Alan Koch. Wasn't that it?
Koch, but yes. Yeah, at least that's what everyone said that I knew, but maybe it was Koch. I don't know.
Who knows? Who cares?
But yeah, completely agree.
Yeah, and on the awards front, I think it's hard not to set the expectations for multiple wins, knowing like what we believe in our players and our coach. Personally, I would say I would be disappointed if we didn't have at least two of the winners, and that's Berkey and Carnell. I would be annoyed, mildly annoyed, a little bit annoyed if Edu Leuven didn't win Newcomer of the Year, because I think that's a very nebulous argument of how you define a Newcomer of the Year. Like, do you define it in eyes that this person has brought onto the league, the exposure that a singular player has brought into the league? Because if you define it that way, then it's Lionel Messi. If you define it as the best individual contributor of goals or best individual performance for a team, then it's Giacampus, the guy from Atlanta. If you define it as biggest overall impact to a team and assisting a team getting the farthest in their first year in the league, then you can have an easier argument for Edu Leuven. And I try not to be too rosy glasses on this one as a City fan, because I know the competition that Leuven is facing in this category. But Leuven and Parker are the other two. So Parker is Defender of the Year. If we had those four, I would be thrilled. That would be incredible to have Berkey, Carnell, Parker, and Leuven. If we had three, I'd be very happy. One of Parker or Leuven. If we had two, I would be happy. You know, I think those are the obvious ones. Put it that way.
Less than two, you're angry.
Less than two, I'm angry. Because something will have gone drastically wrong with the reasoning behind the voters. And I feel when you're looking at players, front office, and media, Berkey is goalkeeper. Like, because here's the thing, because Berkey is in the conversation for MVP and he's the only goalkeeper in the conversation for MVP and he's legitimately getting some votes, I think that's locked in goalkeeper of the year. There's no legitimate argument that a contender for MVP should not win the category that exists because of his singular position. Period. End of story. Like that's Berkey's award. Carnell is the one that there have been a lot of, I've seen Noonan posts a lot. I've even seen Wilfred Nancy from Joe Lowry. Like, God love you, Joe Lowry. You're a fantastic analyst. Backheeled is an amazing website. The work you do is tremendous, but in no reality, especially not this reality of this season of soccer, does Wilfred Nancy earn Coach of the Year over Bradley Carnell or even Pat Noonan.
It's a hipster pick. I know why he voted for him. The dude's very intriguing. But if you're looking at just results, and if you're looking at just results for 2023, I think you win every time.
Yeah, I didn't understand that one in the context of what a Coach of the Year is supposed to denote.
The St. Louis and Taylor Twellman did an interview with Wilfred Nancy, and it was so interesting. It was really cool. I understand that vote. Part of me wishes he was the national team coach right now, actually, if we could have pulled that off. But interesting. I think with Leuven, my biased opinion is that it's not even close. You know, if you want to vote Messi, I understand why. I think if you like goals, Giakoumakis, I think is how you pronounce that.
Georgios Giakoumakis, I'm pretty sure.
Giakoumakis. Okay.
I think it's Giakoumakis. That's my final answer. If we're doing who wants to spell Giakoumakis' name correctly, that's what I'm going with.
My wife's Greek, so I should probably figure that out. We're going to Greece next summer.
This should be right up your alley then.
I can ask around, yeah. I should have known that.
Grab a jersey of his.
Yeah, maybe. But if you like goals, like I think he's the winner there. But yes. Leuven, I mean, if you watch him every week, it's kind of hard to not be amazed with what the man's been able to do in this league.
That's why that award in particular is so difficult to guess on. I would just be really thrilled if Leuven got it, because that would indicate the recognition for his contributions overall to City, from set pieces to midfield leadership, defensive abilities, playmaking abilities, goal scoring abilities. Like he's there. Yeah. And for that to be recognized, fantastic. But if somebody else like Giakoumakis gets it, Messi gets it, it'll tell me what I can at least make a correlation to what the voters were thinking. Like you said, individual goal scoring contributions.
Fair enough.
Notoriety. I can make these connections, and I'd be fine with that.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts, Matt, before we move on?
No, I think we've beaten this end of year work with that until they're actually announced. I think I'm done talking about them until they're announced. I might even have to mute some words on social media until they're announced. Stay safe out there.
Yeah, let's just end on that one with, again, it is so cool to me still. Like I'm not worked up about it because I'm just so thrilled that so many people are naming City players. Because like I said, like I was a bit shocked when Indy Vassilev got the call up, because I was like, well, no one's calling up City players. That's for sure. And it was so cool to see that he's actually getting some recognition. And I really feel like if the national team was watching St. Louis, they probably should have considered Azil Jackson as well. Right. Just because, like for what they want out of an attacking player, the man, I mean, provides a lot of that. And they're totally different players. So like you would have to be looking for a dribbly guy who knows how to defend the hell from the front, that's something that the U.S. national team probably needs more of. But I know why they brought Indy in, and I absolutely respect that. But, the fact that, like I said, City guys aren't getting called up to the national team as much as I would like. And so I expected that to happen at the end of the year, and it's made me so incredibly happy. I've been so mad about the other stuff. I'm, on the other hand, now so happy that they've gotten some recognition in this way. So
well, and on that note too, I personally get caught up in the minutia, like the day to day of what's going on with City. Maybe it's the podcast that we do and the fact that we do the recap and the preview shows, and I'm focused on like prepping all the stuff for that and looking in the moments without pulling my nose up and seeing the big picture of, here we have a roster getting ready to be released for this tournament, or this level of the national team is getting ready to announce their camp for this month. And I lose sight often of not just who's eligible from City, but just, I guess, the fact that it may happen for any one of these players. There are select players. I think there's a pool of players from City that we look to for this, and it's often at the youth level at this point, because Tim Parker's days with the national team, I think, are done. And they've been done for a bit. I would love if he got one more call up to a camp or something, but I'm not going to hold out hope. So we look at the youngsters. We look at Indiana Vasilev. We look at Nico Gioacchini, who we've talked a lot this year on the fact that he was a Gold Cup star a couple of years ago, and we hope to see him again at the men's national team level. But beyond those guys, it trickles down to the youth level of AZ Jackson, Miguel Perez, now Michael Wenzel. You have Tyson Pierce. You have Jackson Delkus, Caden Glover. Don't forget him. All of these guys who are coming up from the academy who have earned call-ups to camps and who are starting to earn homegrown contracts. We now have 3 homegrown signed to St. Louis City. All of them have youth national team experience. That's a pretty cool thing to say.
It's incredible. And it's just the beginning, everyone.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that's the part that I think we should all be most excited about, actually, is I do think the future of seeing City players in a USA jersey is bright. I think it'll be bright in the future, more so than now. And I don't think we've been wronged yet on the national team. I want to make sure that's clear. I'm not an idiot. Like, they're borderline players, right, as far as the national team goes. And I hope we elevate Gioacchini to being a must-have on the national team, at least in the Gold Cup in the future. But, we're not there yet, but I think it is bright for the future.
That's the reason why I think these are coming as surprises or happy things that we're seeing. And we're never in a situation of, why didn't they call up Nico? Because we get it. Like, we know who the main stars are for the national team. We know what the A lineup is, A and a B roster at this point.
He's got to pass up Ferreira and Vasquez.
Yeah.
He might have passed up Vasquez this year, actually.
If he can be consistent, the problem with Nico is what we talked about, the lineups, of the fact that we didn't mention his name in the past 5 games. Yeah. It's been Klaus and Sam. And so that's something to watch for going in Seattle. And then in the playoffs is, do we run our 2 striker formation starting with Klaus and Sam, or does Nico break through? Because I think at this point, the conversations of Nico and the national team have taken a little bit of a backseat to Nico and Sam and Klaus.
Well, and actually, this is a thought I've had in the last 2 weeks, is maybe Sam starts getting conversation, thoughts. If he scores more goals in the next season, if he starts out hot next year, maybe he gets some national team thought as well. Because Lord knows we could use some good striker depth in the national team. Speaking of striker depth, actually, this is too good a transition for me to pass up. Yeah. As Stuart mentioned, Josh Sargent signed with Norwich City up through the 2028 season. So that is incredibly exciting for him. He's been very injured for a few months now, which is unfortunate. He got injured scoring a goal, and I think it was like his 4th or 5th in the season. He was looking like one of the best strikers in the top 3 for sure in the English Championship. And he got injured and he's been out ever since. But here we see Norwich signing him to 2028. And that's super exciting. I know, I guess the first thought might be, oh no, do we want him playing for Norwich till 2028? Well, no, that's not what this necessarily means. And I think we need to view this as Norwich saying, we need to lock him up, because if he stays healthy, he's going to be worth a lot of money. And we're going to be able to sell him to a Premier League club or a German club or France, whatever, name it, right? Maybe Netherlands, right? Maybe he goes and faces up against Pepe in the Netherlands. So Josh Sargent is going to be a good striker for years to come if he can stay healthy. And I think Norwich sees that, and they want to capitalize on keeping him with them until his value is so good that they can sell him on. That's how I viewed this signing, Matt. I don't know what you thought.
Yeah, I think the more consistency that Sargent can have, and the more reassurance that he has a place and knows where he can craft his skill, the better for him. Because knowing that he could go, he could be benched, he could be put out on the wing, he could be loaned to a different team. He could see time, like he could be sold elsewhere. It was all a lot of unknowns for a person who needs the consistency to just put all that out of his memory, put all that out of his mind, and focus on the job at hand, knowing that you're secure. And all you have to do is go out and score goals when you're healthy. And then you'll get the call-ups to the national team. Like if an informed Josh Sargent scoring goals in the championship, in the Premier League, because you never know which one he's going to be in the next few years, that is a Josh Sargent that will be a perennial player on the national team. And that's the kind of Josh Sargent with this security that can really go into the World Cup cycle in a strong position.
Yeah, and let's not forget that he was the best looking United States striker in the World Cup. He was. And I know we got Valerian Balogun coming in now, and so he's going to take the number 1 spot for sure. But, he's up against Pepe, maybe Ferreira for that number 2 spot, and some other guys coming up that could maybe grab it in the next couple of years. Maybe Caden Glover will start trying to challenge him for it in the next World Cup. That'd be hilarious. But right now he's the best striker. And I think with age, Sargent's going to get better. I've always felt that. He's born in 2000, so that's something to keep in mind as a St. Louisan. Sargent was born in 2000. He signed through 2028. That means he'll be 28 years old when he can leave Norwich, and that's the peak of his career. 27, 28. And for Sargent, for real, I could see him scoring even more goals in his 29th and 30th year of living on this planet and playing soccer. So that's like something to get excited for Sargent in the future, no matter what happens in the national team.
I think one other thing this does too, kind of closes the book on Sargent to City conversations.
Oh, not necessarily.
You don't think so? Because like what you just said, I think is if Sargent ends up with City anytime before his 2032, I think it will have been a misstep in his own career.
I agree.
Because this long-term contract with Norwich is going to take him through his age 28 year, like you said. Mm-hmm. But after that, I look for him to, if he's on his progression that we hope he's on, sign with a top 5 league team, a top 5 league competitor.
Yeah.
Who with Champions League experience and a perennial Champions League team. That's the kind of step that I think we look for Josh Sargent to take. And it's not outside of the realm of what we should expect from him, from his caliber of player. And if you can do that, he's going to be consistently on the radar of the national team. And so it all cascades together. If at any point in the next 8 years, 9 years, maybe, Josh Sargent finds himself playing for St. Louis City in MLS, one of 2 things will be true. Either something will have happened detrimental to Josh Sargent's career, or MLS, St. Louis City, and U.S. Soccer takes the meteoric rise over the next few years that is outside of anyone's realm of realistic expectations, and we land ourselves in a top 5 league in the world standing, and suddenly playing in MLS is a desirable position that garners attention on the national team level. One of those things, if one of those things happen, that's where you'll find Josh Sargent in St. Louis playing for St. Louis City. Otherwise, I think it's looking ahead, downslope of his career, where we ultimately first thought he may end up with St. Louis. And the only reason that we're having this conversation is because St. Louis owns his rights if and when he comes to MLS. When MLS did away with their discoverable lists, I believe it was. I haven't been thinking about roster rules for a few weeks now, but when they got rid of their priority discover list, and St. Louis City, as compensation for having that number 1 pick, was able to select one player, we selected Josh Sargent. Mm-hmm. So that means if and when Sargent comes to MLS, St. Louis will have first rights to sign him. That's the only reason why that enters the realm of conversation. But I've seen it talked a few times around about, 28, 29 coming to St. Louis. I think we should be hoping for further out than that.
Completely agree. Yeah. Fingers crossed on that. Unless, hey, that MLS being top 5 league in the world,
you like how I added that one? You like how I added that alternate reality, alternate universe perspective on U.S. Soccer and MLS?
I can't wait to tweet on my 80th birthday that we've finally been voted top 5 league in the world.
Oh man. In our lifetimes. We will have gone from being born into a world where NASL is failing and U.S. Soccer has no Division 1 team or Division 1 league to the USA having a top 5 league in the world. What a lifetime that will have been for us, Phil.
I mean, it's definitely that meme where they're like, okay, grandpa, let's get you back to bed.
Back in my day, we didn't even have a first division league.
Exactly. All right. Well, I think we've filled all of our time with 3 topics tonight on the wind down, which is not surprising. We've done it.
Not for us.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. That's all from us today. Like I said, we got a week here, a bit of a break. The guys are going to be ramping up for Seattle next Saturday. It's going to be a fun one, guys.
Yeah, we hope to have something from this weekend. It's obviously closed door, no people in attendance for the scrimmage, but we hope to hear next week how that went, and then watch some international matches. Tuesday, the U.S. Olympic team plays, so be looking for U.S. Soccer's YouTube for hopefully an Indiana Vassilev sighting. Pay attention to South Africa for Jabulu Blom. We'll pay attention to the Pan Am Games and how that's progressing see if Miguel Perez and or Michael Vincel earn their spots on the team beyond alternates. So a lot of stuff to look for the next week, even though there's no city action. And then we'll be back this time next week with a full preview of Seattle decision day and the race to the finish.
And Matt will get us prepped for that. You know that's true. Look forward to talking to you guys next time. Bye, everybody.